Welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. Brought to you by Elite Consulting Partners, it's the only podcast offering unfiltered guidance and direct advice for all things concerning financial advisors, RIAs, and the practitioners in the wealth management business. Learn more and subscribe today at eliteconsultingpartners.com/podcast. And now, here's your host, Frank LaRosa.
Hey everybody, welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. I am your host, and I am really excited to have my next guest on to talk about a topic that I've been a little bit vocal about, which just sort of goes against the grain, and that is why don't you need to become your own RIA if you're a multi-billion-dollar producer? And so today I had Chip Munn on. Chip is the CEO and founder of a group called Signature Wealth. And, he went through this and he wrote a great article that he forwarded to me. And I thought this would be a tremendous topic. Hearing it from the horse's mouth, right? Hearing it from a multi-billion-dollar producer on why they didn't go the RIA route, because isn't that the chic thing and the thing to do nowadays? So Chip, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Frank. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I think this is going to be a great topic and, a little bit against the grain, because this just tends to be what people don't think you should be doing. So for the audience, maybe just go through a little bit of your background, right? I know we've talked, but I'd like to have them understand where you're coming from and your perspective, right? And then a little bit about Signature, right? How big is it? And then the thought process and why you decided, to basically not form your own RIA, at $2 billion as the article says. So tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a former sixth grade teacher, took a sales job back in the late 90s, or what I thought was a sales job, read a book on mutual funds. My family had literally lost the family farm. So I had an interest in estate planning, but I live in South Carolina, went to Clemson, go Tigers. And the University of South Carolina at the time was where the law school was. And they aren't real kind on Clemson elementary ed students getting into law school. And so read a book on mutual funds, thought that the concept of financial planning, which really interested me in terms at the time of estate planning, was another way to go about being able to do that. So within about 6 months, Frank, realized that as a 23-year-old former teacher, I had all of my friends and families and my family's friends' money. And and that wasn't going to be enough to support me. And so my interest was in financial planning. There was another young advisor in our office, he and his dad, who were your stereotypical stockbrokers at the time. They were interested in investments, and I was interested in planning. And so we decided we would serve I convinced them really to let me do financial planning with them. And 25 years later, here we are. So my partner, Scott, and I have been together for 25 years. Fast forward, we had built a practice at Hilliard Lyons, a regional broker dealer. Back in 2016, we decided that we wanted more flexibility. So we decided that we would go independent, started Signature. We also had a vision, if you will, to be able to have multiple offices, which was not something that we could do in kind of our previous life. And so always thought that would be in Myrtle Beach. We had an advisor, a partner in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We still don't have an office in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, 7 years later. But so in 2016, we came over, joined Raymond James Financial Services. And from there, we had about, at the time, 280 million, give or take. Since then.
So for the audience, I don't mean to interrupt, but just for the audience, because we know the sort of the nomenclature and some of the acronyms and everything. But so RJFS, so Raymond James Financial Services, that's the independent channel side of Raymond James, not the W2 side, and at this point, not the RIA channel either.
Correct. Yeah. And for me, again, that was going from signing the back of a paycheck to signing the front of a paycheck. It's a very different, and it was really quick that we learned what a different world it was, because our team and our office, going back to the regional BD days, they were the same thing. Our entire office was one team. We had an operations manager, a compliance person. So, we ran a P&L. I mean, but it's a lot different. There's a big difference, as you know, Frank, between running a P&L and going. They used to call it below the line. It's like, oh, well, that's below. If you're operating your branch at a loss, it was, oh, well, that expense is below the line. Well, in this world, below the line is your checking account. And so, again, just a rude awakening in terms of just the differences, even from running your own P&L. And so that, combined with the fact that I went to my first Raymond James Financial Services conference, and there were 4,000 people, as compared to there were only 400 advisors at my old company. It was a big culture shock for me. I wanted the flexibility, but I also wasn't accustomed to, being the only person in the room other than my recruiter that I knew. And so we decided that part of what we wanted to do is to be able to recreate kind of that regional culture, that community. And Raymond James gave us an opportunity to do that. So over the last 6 years, our first year, we were kind of getting over, transitioning our business and dealing with that. And then for 3 years, we did a lot of recruiting and brought on another advisor from our previous company, some others who kind of affiliated with us for kind of back or middle office services. And so we did that for 3 years. COVID came. We decided, like a lot of people, to focus on our existing clients, that being our advisors, but also our end clients, and to focus on that. And so for the last 3 years, that's what we've done. But during that period of time, we've grown to just right at $2 billion in assets under management, 15 offices in North and South Carolina and Kentucky, and about 55 total folks. So it's been a good ride so far. But to your point, one of the things when you get to certain benchmarks, and honestly anymore, I don't necessarily know what those are. I just know where we are. People started talking about, well, if you're doing a certain amount of revenue, or if you have a certain number of advisors, or if it's a certain number of AUM, you've got to be an RIA. Like, it's just the conversation was, it's a no-brainer. So, So last year we decided we'd take a look.
Yeah. So so this is something that I think, in some of it's, you made a comment about below the line. This whole idea of, once you hit $1 billion, you need to have your own RIA, because now you have scale. Everyone talks about scale, and you can create better technology, and you can best of breed in technology, all that stuff, right? And I'm not saying that that's not true, right? Like, I think that's one of the things that we should. Neither of us are saying that's not true. It right. is, but it just might not be for you, right? That's the difference. So tell me, you were talking to me about your, as you started this process, how you were doing research on your iPad and your iPhone and all that stuff, and it sort of dawned on you what was happening. So tell me a little bit about your thought process.
Well, again, so coming into 2022, we hired a consultant. One of the cool things about Raymond James as a company in general is that we have the ability, should we choose to change division. So we still can, I suppose, transition to the RIA channel of Raymond James without having to go through a lot of the pain of doing it at a different custodian. So we had that as an option. We let Raymond James know. They were very transparent and kind in that process. There's a whole internal deal. But in addition to that, we also hired an external consultant to come in and look at just the financial component of things. And after going through that, Frank, one of the things that, and again, I think what I told you and I wrote about in the article is, I was doing all this research on an iPhone, an iPad, and a MacBook. And one of the biggest complaints that we get is, oh, it's a closed system and you have to build all your open architecture on technology and you're going to build all your own stack. And here I was doing all my research on a closed system, all these Apple products. And Apple itself is probably the ultimate form of simplicity by building a closed system. And the reason that I use Apple products for at least all of my personal stuff is because it works. It just works. It's simple. It all integrates together. And again, that was just a big realization for me that while I have lots of friends in the RIA space who are talking about building out their tech stack and when they're going to bill in advance or in arrears, and how do you make sure that you're not miscrediting somebody, or just a lot of that stuff. And it reminded me a lot of what I understand the Android marketplace to be, right? Anybody can put an app on there. There are all these things, and some of them work well and some of them don't. And it just, again, in listening to that as part of my research, I wanted things that work. I wanted them to work reliably. I wanted them to work together. And I think it was Jobs that said simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And I think that, again, as an advisor, a big part of what we need in terms of service and our clients and taking care of them is you need the right tools. But in reality, Frank, you and I both know we're not using 3,000 tools. Most of us on any given day running a relatively efficient practice have 3 or 4 tools that we use on a regular basis. And so what I found, again, as part of the research and looking at the options, was that what we had worked well enough. Is it best in breed? I don't know. Raymond James might make that argument. I would say that it's more than good enough for what we needed to be able to serve our clients. And so, now again, a big part of it was, what's the motivation? When people talk about you need to make a move, I would almost throw it back to you. They're usually talking about economic.
Right. Well, first of all, as it relates to technology, I get to see everything, and I'd like to expand on the type of research that you did, because I think some people are probably wanting to know, like, well, what research did you do, right?
Sure.
What was the process you went through? But I do believe that Raymond James's tech, when you look at a turnkey, sort of all in, are you missing anything kind of thing? I think Raymond James is probably top 1 or 2 in my opinion, in the industry in terms of ease of use, the way it looks, the way it operates, interaction with clients, accessibility, both on the advisor side and the client, client facing version of that, which was equally important, right? Because it's about client experience. So that's my opinion there. And I tell people
Sure.
that all the time when someone says, "Hey, what's the best tech out there?" And I usually say, well, without having to customize and build it yourself, Raymond James is right up there. And candidly, Ameriprise is right up there too. Ameriprise has really tremendous tech. And then people are surprised, like, really? Like, oh yeah, both Raymond James and Ameriprise, they've done a good job. And sort of, again, it's a closed system, but they've done a tremendous job building a closed system. So can you just talk through some of the things that you went through? You must have, you're a pretty analytical guy and you're pretty, you're a smart guy. So you must have had a checklist or things that you walked through that were must-haves. Hey, if we were going to do this, we have to have X, Y, or Z, or it's got to look like whatever. Like, what was the process that you went through and the things that you looked at in deciding to do it or not to do it?
Sure. So, well, first, I'm a big Dan Sullivan who not how person. So that is I don't want to take any, if not all, of the credit for the process, because one of the things that we did several years ago was we brought in a chief operating officer. His name's Barry Dedge. He was on the leadership team at Hilliard when we were there. Because one of the things, as you know, there's a big difference between leadership and management, and bringing in somebody with experience. Barry's experience specifically from his time at Hilliard was in technology. So we had a head start, if you will, on that in terms of even relationships with other, because if you moved from Raymond James, again, the independent channel to the RIA channel, the technology is the same. Then it comes to, well, what if we were to do it outside that? So if you were to ask me what things I think are kind of that core, you got to have a CRM. Everything operates off of that. You're going to have performance reporting. If you're in an RIA, you're going to have billing, account aggregation. A lot of it depends on whether you have multi-custodian or one custodian as to how many different things talk together. You've got your conferencing technology, whether that's Teams or Zoom. You've got, again, scheduling. Like if you look at and again, for me, when I look at, and again, I'm not here to talk about Raymond James. That's not the point.
Yeah.
But what I know is, and part of the reason that we joined Raymond James 7 years ago was at the time they were spending over $250 million a year on various forms of tech. Didn't even get into cybersecurity, which is a whole different level of risk. But now, we were just at the Elevate conference. It's like $600 or $700 million a year as an entity that they're spending. And so, there's always going to be something new and cutting edge. And believe me, I love that stuff.
So when you looked at, if you were looking at, doing it yourself, and whether you were looking at Schwab or TD or, probably at the time could have been Schwab or TD, if it was a couple of years ago, Fidelity, Pershing, what was it that you weren't finding, right? Like we get the idea that you found you had what you had at Raymond James, but you clearly didn't find something, something on the outside. What were those things that if you were talking to Schwab, that you went, this is not going to work for me?
It's not that you couldn't find it, right? Because it's out there and all those folks will let you have it. But it wasn't better enough. Like it's a big disruption to change firms, to change business models, to change any of that kind of thing. And it disrupts your team. It disrupts your clients. And for me, it really came down in my heart of hearts, Frank, to saying, all right, if I could put these two or three things together, because again, based on it's not a Schwab specific, for example, thing. Schwab would just let me they have some services or offerings, but then they would let me have all these other things. And so would Fidelity. And so it became all these things are available, but are they better enough to put my team and my clients through a major disruption? When we left the regional broker dealer to become independent, it was worth it for everybody. You go through it probably y'all have a team on a daily basis going through it. It's hard. It's not easy for a little while, but then you settle in and you're assuming you're making a change. Your team's better off. Your client, that was definitely the case for us. But in this case, it's a major change. All these back office things, unless you're hiring your own people, they aren't things that we're trained to do. And so it's a major change. And if you're unless you're hiring an entirely new team to run it, those are the same people who are looking after your clients and fielding client phone calls and dealing with market volatility. And it wasn't so much that you couldn't find things other places. You can. Is it really worth it to the client experience? Again, it depends on where you are. But a big thing for us was it wasn't worth it enough to put all those stakeholders in a state of transition and potentially turmoil.
Yeah, when I do some of the economics and do some comparisons for our clients, and we look at the RIA side, and then we compare it to a sort of a more I don't say captive, but independent broker dealer, right? So an independent broker dealer versus an RIA. There's definitely a differential in economics, but I talk to our clients about what is that? How do you view that spread? And the way I view that spread is by giving it up, by not going down that road, right? And then having to spend all the time, because you as the owner are responsible for all of those things. When the SEC walks into your office, right, they want you. Yes, they're going to talk to your ops guy, but they want you because you're where the buck stops. And that could be
No doubt.
majorly disruptive. And so I look at that spread, whether it's 3, 4, 5 points, whatever the spread is, right, as a reinvestment back in you and your team, because it's by you not having to do those things, you can go and do what you do really well, right? So Dan Sullivan, right, strategic coach and all that stuff, right people, right seats, and all that good stuff. And so I totally firmly believe in that, and that's why I think that not everybody's cut out to do it, and you might be saving or picking up 5 points, but it may cost you a lot more than that in the long run if you're spending all of your time dealing with the operational side, compliance, and not going out and meeting clients and doing what you did really well to build the business in the first place.
Yeah, well, I mean, I heard somebody say once, everybody can multiply and add, nobody can divide and subtract. And I took that to heart. And I think that's the case. There may be a spread initially, and there may be a spread on paper. And again, it's not either of our position to say what people should or shouldn't do. That's not the point of the conversation. There may be a spread, but it's important to understand, again, what all those things are and what the costs are. If you're not going to be the one doing them, then you're going to have to hire if you're at a place that does your billing, you're going to have somebody who does billing. If you're at a place who does, who basically funnels down a lot of the accounting, you're going to have again, that's a completely different set of skills maybe than your operations manager when you're in in a different setup. And so again, it's not better or worse necessarily. I guess more my point was it may be good for some people, but it's not good for everybody. And the only thing I ever heard, Frank, was that everybody should do that. Like, this is the thing. When you get to why would they still, and again, I'm not even talking about us, right? Why would a team stay at a wirehouse? They should just go, and you and I both know that that's a spectrum that you have to pick and choose what it is you're willing to do yourself. And again, where I came down, honestly, was I decided that whatever that spread was that you're talking about, was that it was my job as the CEO to figure out how to get our investments worth out of our relationship with Raymond James. That became my responsibility. Like, this is an investment that we're making in the same way that we would hold accountable somebody that we were, that we hired. Yeah, my job is to go in and figure out what the resources are that make it worth it, and
to make up that difference, right?
Well, they say in marriage, Frank, that the grass is green on the other side because they water it and you don't. And I think that there's a lot of similarity in. Sometimes it's easy to get, sideways, unhappy,
complacent,
whatever. And so you think that the solution is out there, and it can be, it might be, but it's also, at least for me, it was important to say, all right, but when I compare that to what I have, could I make up some of the difference in that spread that we're talking about by actually just better using what's available?
Right. How do you feel about, because you obviously must have looked, and I know you even looked at, again, what the audience needs to understand is that you could have easily just slid over to the Raymond James RIA channel, right? And it would have been it still would have been work, but it would have been significantly easier than moving to Schwab or TD or whoever else, right? So that was a decision also. But how do you feel about not having a multi-custody? Because that's the other thing everyone talks about. Oh my God, you have to be multi-custody if you want to build a multi-billion-dollar business, which I also totally disagree with. Not that I don't think that some people need to do that and there's opportunity there, but I don't think that you have to be multi-custody in order to build a multi-billion-dollar business, and you're proving it. So,
well, to my knowledge, the largest team in South Carolina is with Merrill Lynch. They're 3 times our size, and they're doing just fine. I think at the end of the day, but where it comes back to for me is who says that it has to be. And again, I get it. Yeah. You could make that argument. Best I know from the folks that I know who are in the, again, $500 million and up space in the RIA channel, many of them have the bulk of their assets with one custodian. It's not a third, a third, and a third. It's 80%, 10%, 10%. So it is again, what are you trying to do? If you're moving to a platform to be able to recruit, and you want to say, for example, Schwab is the biggest, and if I want to be able to bring over, like, what are you solving for? But for me, I think that gets into, and the same answer is liquidity. Liquidity is not the only, and the valuation and all that stuff is not the only thing. It's not the client, Frank, telling the advisor that they need to be multi-custodian. And
right.
It's not Schwab either.
That is so true. Well, Schwab is telling, Schwab is telling them they actually,
there was somebody else.
Right, exactly. Schwab is like, oh no, you need to be multi-custody, bring everything over here, right? And then don't be multi-custody, just use Schwab.
Exactly. And again, going back, do my clients really want multiple custodians? Is there a value to that? Maybe there is for a very small segment of people in my life, but it wasn't enough to, again, disrupt all of the people. The people who benefit most financially from a multiple expansion are the owners. The people who do a tremendous amount of work in the transition are not necessarily owners. So again, from my standpoint, the question then was it the client? Is the client telling us we need to be multi-custodian? Nope. It's again, the echo chamber of the industry saying, because my client, as far as I know, I've never lost a client because we weren't in 25 years, because we weren't multi-custodial. They just want to know that the custodian that you have is financially secure, that they can trust, that their money's going where it's supposed to. I don't think that's a client concern.
No, I agree. I think it's most of it. And I think a lot of advisors have this sort of this FOMO, right? Like fear of missing out. Like they're going to come across a prospect and the person's going to be, married to Schwab, and they're not going to be able to make a good argument about the value of whether it's Raymond James or any other broker dealer that they're on, whether it's LPL, doesn't matter, right? Whether, so it's the advisor's inability to articulate to the client why being on with LPL or Raymond James or Ameriprise, or doesn't matter, Merrill Lynch, right? Like why it's about the advisor's advice, the experience that they're going to get, and that they don't need to have, some of the accounts at Raymond James and some of the accounts at Schwab and maybe a few accounts at Pershing or whatever. And I think that's, again, another misnomer that people go into. You made a comment, and I want to, in the interest of time, I want to talk about this because you made a comment about this. So clearly you thought about this. There's also this whole idea of, and there was an article recently published about the valuations, and you have to have your own RIA to get the best valuation for your business, which I also think is not true, because I see what's happening with large practices at Raymond James or Ameriprise or LPL. And they're not they're not their own RIAs, but they're getting massive valuations. Again, not that that's important, but you write about that a little bit in your article, and you talk about a liquidity event isn't the only thing to solve for. So what was your thought process there when you were thinking about that?
Well, a lot of what I was hearing, right, it comes down to having unlimited choice, basically, right? And that's one. So then you say, well, all right, well, that's not a primary driver of decision making for me. Then the other, again, kind of industry argument is, well, everybody talks about enterprise value, and you've got to build a scalable business. And again, neither of us is going to dispute that. But we also, again, there's a lot of talking out of both sides of your mouth, right? We want to talk about how we need to be multi-custodian, but we're also the same people who say, my clients aren't clients of the firm, they're clients of mine. Same is true, kind of that same thought process or duality kind of comes in when it comes to valuation. The only reason to either stay or go, it's not all about EBITDA. But there's not been any conversation, again, with the exception, I have heard several of your episodes where you kind of touch on it, about the fact that, again, how about solving for happiness? How about solving for Again, the concept of community and being part of something bigger than just you. Those can, for a lot of people, can be just as important as this ultimate value. And you and I have also talked about the fact that for a lot of people, if you build a good business, and again, I feel like we have, and our hope is to continue to, as we build out with advisors who join our community, to help them do the same, to build a business you don't want to retire from. I mean, the liquidity event comes when you're ready to cash out. And if, I'm 47, I've been doing this for 25 years. My son just started with us. He's still studying for his exams. And my goal is to practice longer with him than without him. Then what am I in a hurry to retire for? And I think there are a lot of people that I've heard you do the math of you're giving up a couple of years of income. I mean, folks can go back and you've probably said it a dozen times that what are we in a hurry to sell for? Why not instead build a practice you're not in a rush to retire from?
Yeah, we were talking. I was having a conversation with a large team the other day, and we're talking about retirement and what our wives think and all that other stuff. And I said, I don't really want to retire. I just want to work differently. Right? It's
Sure.
I think you see people in this industry, and a lot of people. You spent your whole career in this industry. I've spent my whole career. Everybody, and then all of a sudden you do some deal because you got enamored by the big check, which really was just really the 7 years of upfront payments on your business, which is 7, 8, whatever, you can do the math, but it's generally about that. But then what you've known your whole career is essentially over. And I've seen a lot of people not handle that well, and emotionally, mentally, emotionally, they're not used to not going in the office and all that other, and talking to their clients who are now their friends, right? Because once you retire, there's things you can't do anymore, and conversations you can't have with your clients about the market, their portfolio, their positions, because you're violating certain rules. So I do think that valuation, and people need to not necessarily get enamored by those things. Build a practice and a life that you don't want to retire from. There's a saying that says, build a life that you don't want to take a vacation from. Right.
That's right.
Build a business that you don't want to retire from.
Sure. And there's no reason you can't just be the owner, right? You can just be the owner and not the operator. Going back to the E-Myth, entrepreneur versus manager versus technician. It's not one or the other. And again, a lot of us went independent because we wanted flexibility but then to start talking about private equity or taking on one of the reasons that I don't have any interest in private equity is because I didn't want a boss. You wanted freedom and flexibility, and we have to understand that a lot of the folks coming into the industry, and again, good for people. If it's your time, have at it. But but for others of us,
if someone's giving you a big check, they're your boss.
They want a return on their investment sooner or later, and so you have to be mindful of that.
So can you talk about, you mentioned this, and it's sort of along these lines, and your quote yesterday was, do life with cool people.
Yeah.
So can you just talk, I want to talk just for a few minutes about Signature as a company, right?
Sure.
So moving off of, because do life with cool people, we talked about, we sort of went down a rabbit hole yesterday in terms of masterminds and some of the people that I know, and what you're doing with strategic coach and stuff like that. Can you just talk about that as a cultural thing that you're doing at Signature, and why that to you is really important?
Sure. Well, at the end of the day, going back to how I felt in that room when I made the transition to a bigger company, despite the fact that I wanted freedom and flexibility, at the end of the day, I've come to terms with the fact what I wanted wasn't independence per se. It was flexibility. I didn't like that the place that I was, you used the term, I think, captive. I could use the word constrained. You could be in too constrained an environment. And what you really want, as I have looked back on it, what I really wanted was flexibility. I wanted more flexibility than I had. But the feeling that I got when I walked in that room, and And the only person I literally knew was my recruiter. I hadn't even met my regional person yet. I mean, again, I had met Scott Curtis and some of the folks on the home office, but I didn't know anybody in there. And it was lonely. It was like being the new kid at a different school on the first day of 7th grade, right? You're all awkward and you're still trying to figure yourself out. And now you're meeting all these new people and they don't know you and they all know each other. And it's super weird. And I didn't want to do that. And so when we started thinking about that, one of the things I told you, I had a client ask me, or a prospective client ask me what I did. And my answer was, I do life with cool people. Like when I think about it, like all the other stuff, what I feel really grateful for is the ability that, to your point earlier, my clients have become my friends, my now teammates and our other advisors. And so that really what we wanted to do was run Signature Wealth Group in a similar way to the way that we run a practice, where you want to get together with people. Like these are our people. And that word community is a big deal. But going back to cool, when people would say, well, what does that mean? Right? It's like, oh, you want to do business with cool people. What does cool even mean? So I decided I would look at what our core values were and try to at least make it into some sort of acronym. So for me, it stands for collaborative, open-minded and authentic, others focused and drama-free, because none of us needs more drama, and loyal and accountable. That cool. And that's how then we look and we say, are you a cool person? Because if you are, and again, I'm a Gen X guy. That was just a word I used casually a lot.
Yeah.
But by then turning around and tying it to when we're looking for a new team member, when I'm evaluating a client, a prospective client, those are the things that I want to look for. And so when you have the ability, Frank, as I know, because again, I follow you on LinkedIn, so I see all your posts of you and your team doing stuff together. When you get to do life with cool people, you want to spend time together. And so a big part of our commitment is to building that community and doing things like, we do events around the Raymond James event. So when we're at we just got back from Elevate and there were 25 of us inside so you had people to meet for breakfast and for dinner and to go bowling. And you had a smaller community inside, you had a city inside the state or a state inside the country. I mean, you had a smaller group to identify with. But then on top of that, a big thing for us is we've started doing 3 masterminds a year where we get together for a couple of days, advisors only, and share best practices and get to know each other. And what we have found is, my goal when we talk about community and cool people is anytime somebody joins our community, for the entire community to get better. And I think that is, again, what it's all about is that when they get better by being associated with these other folks, whether it's an area of expertise that they don't have or a point of view from practice management, but also the group gets better because you're bringing in somebody new with fresh ideas. There's not a lot of groupthink. And I just got back from our most recent, we had 15 advisors we rented a couple of lake houses that were side by side and spent a couple of days together. And one of the neatest things, Frank, is about half of the advisors there were under the age of 40, and watching the older advisors pour into the younger ones and vice versa was really neat. And I think that's something that our industry really needs, not just from a training standpoint, right? It's not just how to make cold calls or door knock or whatever. It's really that pouring into them, I think, is awesome, and pouring into each other.
Yeah. I see some of that in the industry, but not really enough. I talk to a lot of advisors around the country, and I talk about sort of personal development, and a lot of them sort of look at me funny, or they get uncomfortable. Oh my God, I have to be authentic, and I have to, but I think it's missing in our industry, and So I appreciate the fact that you do those things. You attend those events. You're bringing people together. You're doing for others, which is great. So it's sort of in wrapping it up here, because this has been a great conversation. But I want to give you a minute here to, when you talk about doing for others, and you mentioned recruiting, and you've brought advisors on, and you have multiple offices, right? So what kind of advisors are you looking? If there's an advisor out there that is looking for something like this, and like, wow, I like that guy. Like, what are you looking for in advisors that are coming to you? And speaking to the audience, this is sort of like your opportunity to tell them a little bit about, maybe why joining Signature is a good idea. And, but what are you looking for in cool people? We know cool people, right? But as advisors, what is it that you're looking for where you seem like where you can help those people the best?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's what it's always been, was the ability to. Yeah, we built it originally to help our practice. These were all the things that I needed to operate day to day. Our ideal community member, the ideal person that we're built to serve is somebody between $50 and $250 million, wanting to grow to some extent, but who. Oftentimes, most of the advisors that we have found that we can help best come from a constrained environment, right? They want more flexibility. They don't necessarily want to be. We can call it independent, but they don't want to do it alone. And so, maybe they're in an office by themselves, and it's easy to feel disconnected. And so, I think that where we are is, for advisors who want to grow, even if I just talked to an advisor from a captive or a constrained firm last week who wants to transition because they want more flexibility. The policies of the firm have gotten a little too restrictive. Maybe they don't like some of the social things that are getting they feel forced upon them. They're not down for that. But they also like the culture that they're in terms of some togetherness. For that person, and he wants to, he's in his early 60s, wants to run a practice for another 10 years and figure out succession. So he wants to grow from, call it 700 to 1 million. Great. Let's grow it, and then you can sell it. You can sell it to us if you want to, but I think if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's that advisor who is, who believes we're better together. That's what we believe.
Okay. And so if someone's looking to find out some more information on your firm, where would they go?
Sure. They can find me personally. They're welcome to reach out to me personally. They can find me on LinkedIn, or they can go to our website, signaturewealth.com. We're pretty easy to find in terms of that. And at the end of the day, Frank, I think, or at least I hope, folks will realize from this conversation, I just want to see people end up where they're supposed to. If we're a good fit, great. If not, it's all good. It's all good. I mean, that's what. And again, I really encourage folks to use you guys or somebody like you who shows them options. I mean, that's how we ended up where we are, and even after the research has been the perfect place for us. But it's because we went through a process. Somebody showed us multiple options. We looked at, and we ended up in the right place. And I firmly believe that, again, it doesn't make sense to me for folks to feel like they got to figure this out on their own. I would highly encourage them to engage somebody, to be able to show you all the options in the same way that we do clients.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and thank you for your time. This was really good. We covered a couple different topics that which was great, but it just really gets my listeners sort of in the head of a successful practitioner who's built a multi-billion-dollar company, and doing it in a way that most people today, don't think that you can do it that way. Clearly, you're doing it. You're having success, and it's tremendous. So, for the audience, thank you very much for listening. If you're listening and you weren't watching, you can go check us out on our YouTube channel, which is Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa on our YouTube channel. You can see Chip and his office back there, and he's just a regular guy like all of us, built a great business through trust, honesty, transparency, and just wanted to do business with cool people. So I love the acronym, which is awesome. So thank you very much, Chip. I appreciate it, and look forward to doing some business with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. If you're looking for more advice or solutions on any topics in the financial services industry, or you just want to subscribe to our podcast, head on over to eliteconsultingpartners.com/podcasts.